Did you ever encounter someone that told you, I left the church or I stopped practicing because I was so disappointed in the people that I met at church? I remember I got to experience this firsthand because some years ago, a brother who was part of my religious order, after maybe 8 years in formation, he told me, I'm leaving because I'm so disappointed in what I find in the church, in my community. I find a lot of hypocrisy. People profess with their lips something, but behind closed doors, they live with their lives something completely different. Did you ever find someone who made this case? A lot of people make this case. They say, Christians are so disappointing and many times they don't live up to what they say. So they kind of say, what's the point of practicing a faith that nobody lives up to what they're claiming to want to do or be? How do we respond to this? Is there a response to this objection or question? How do we quench the anxiety that people experience when they see that Christians say something with their lips and live something different with their life? If you found someone who was making this case, what would you do? Maybe you would call Father David and you will tell him, Father David, you got the answers for everything. Please convince this person that they're wrong. But I think that today's parable of the wheat and the weed is the response that everybody needs for this question. Everybody's concern about people being disappointing is, let's say, solved in today's parable. Let's look at the parable, right? So the owner first puts in the good seed. But then when it grows, the laborers notice that the wheat is mixed with the weeds. What's their reaction? The reaction is of disappointment. And what's the solution they propose? They say, let's pull out everything. Let's get rid of everything. Like people when they say, I'm getting rid of the church. I'm not coming back because I'm so disappointed. It's the same reaction of the people in the gospel. They say, let's get rid of everything because the fact that the wheat and the weed are mixed means that it's not worthwhile anymore. But St. Augustine, one of the greatest preachers in church history, says this parable is one of the most eloquent images of what the church is. Because the church is always a mixture of wheat and weed. We would want the church to be just wheat. We would want all of us to come to church and be certain that everyone around us is perfectly holy. But guess what, guys? We're all human beings. So what you will find in church is exactly the image of today's parable. Wheat and weed all mixed up. So then the question is, why would someone be disappointed if Jesus already lays out what is it that they should expect to find in the church? So now let's ask ourselves this question. Why is it convenient for the wheat and the weed to grow together? Why would God in His wisdom and mercy allow wheat and weed to grow together? Wouldn't it be better if every time that someone was a weed, God would just dispense with them so that only the pure could be kept in church? So why is it convenient in the mind of Augustine that both wheat and weed are together? Because St. Augustine says there was a time where we were all weed. Isn't that true? Isn't it true for you? Because it's certainly true for me. That there was a time where it was weed. And if God would dispense with every weed at the time that there were weed, then what time would we have for conversion? And St. Augustine also says it's good for the wheat and the weed to be together, because who can be certain that the other person is wheat or weed? So that's why St. Augustine says, here we can see the words of Jesus, do not judge, and you won't be judged. So wheat and weed are all mixed up in the church. So it gives you and me the chance not to judge anyone. But isn't it also true that wheat and weed can also be found in your own life? Who of us can claim, I'm perfectly wheat all the time, 100%, 24/7, with no trace of any weed in my soul? So St. Augustine also says, within ourselves, God allows weed, and pay attention because this is a beautiful thought, so that the beautiful fruit of the wheat of humility could grow within our souls. Why is there weed in our own souls? So that the beautiful fruit of humility could grow also within our souls. So brothers and sisters, if you ever feel disappointed in the church, if you ever feel disappointed in the priests, in the religious, in your fellow members, churchgoers, if you find other people disappointed, tell them or read yourself today's parable. And you will understand that it's all within God's providence that wheat and weed would always grow together. So that we could allow the chance for the weed to turn into wheat, so that we could practice the idea of not judging, because we don't know anyone's heart, but also wheat and weed are within our hearts, so that in seeing our weed, we can allow the beautiful fruit of humility to grow within our hearts. May the Lord in this gospel grant us a deeper love for the Catholic Church. Understanding that we cannot expect of the Catholic Church or of any of its members to be impeccable, to be perfect, to be stainless. But rather, in spite of its mistakes and in spite of the weakness of its members and many times of its leaders, we could be able to still love it, pray for it, lay our lives down for it.